Well, when I'm interviewed often in my country, Riga, Latvia, then I'm always asked, how do you feel having reached such an age? And I am 91 and a half, and 6th of February, I'll be 92. Then I always answer, I am not old and I am not young, but I am very rich in experiencing life. So there is a big difference between saying somebody is old or young. It is the experience of life that is the most important thing in life. Now, since you know now how old I am, I have been through the war, I know what it means to be hungry, I know what it means to be afraid of bombs coming down. In fact, in Vienna, while I was studying dance there at the Academy of Music and Performing Arts, the bombs came down during the war, and I was buried alive under a big building. Then I thought, is it really already time for me to go? I have not achieved anything yet. I wanted to become a dancer, a choreographer, a teacher. I did become all of this. I was shoveled out, and here I am looking at you. And I have many things to share, since this has been a long time, that, God willing, I'm still alive and enjoy. So I remember, for example, that I, as a little girl in Latvia, Riga, by the way, Latvia is the amber country. That is where we get amber from the Baltic Sea. And I, as a little girl, after a big storm, went always with a stick and looked through all the stuff that came out of the depths of the sea. And I found a lot of amber pieces. I was very rich in amber at that time. I'm wearing a bit here. And I also remember how I, as a little girl, danced to the full moon. I always, since the very beginnings, since I can remember, I wanted to become a dancer, and I danced since I can remember. So when I was 5, I saw the first time in my life a ballet performance, Swan Lake. That was it. I am going to be a swan. But my family didn't particularly want me to become a dancer. They realized it was a difficult profession, it was a short-lived profession, and so forth. But I was very determined. So I ran away from home about the year when I was 16, and I went to Vienna. And there I was taken in to the Academy for Music and Performing Arts on a full scholarship, and studied there for 4 years. I have the equivalency of master's degree from Juilliard, so I'm told here, when I was teaching at Teachers College, Columbia University, Barnard College, and also teaching a course at NYU. So that was my life, the life of a dancer. And I have been visiting 5 continents. I missed out on South America, but otherwise I've been in pretty much in every continent, performing, choreographing, and teaching, and that is my life so far, still. And last year I performed my Jubilee performance, a performance of 2 hours to celebrate my 90 years and 70 years on stage. Was a performance in Riga, Latvia. By the way, Riga this year, 14, is the cultural capital of Europe. So there a lot went on there, and I gave this year again a performance of 2 hours celebrating my 91st year and 71 years on stage. So everybody says I should be in the Guinness Book. But how to get in there, I wouldn't know. Somebody has to do it, I think. So remembering my childhood, I think childhood experiences are the ones that stick the most with us. I danced to the full moon. And nobody knew about it. It was a very secret thing. When I was spending the summer with relatives in the countryside in Latvia, I got silent secretly out, and I knew where the full moon would come up, and I went there to meet the full moon, my oldest friend in my life. I still regard the full moon as my oldest friend and the most and best understanding audience of my dance. So whenever there is full moon, I'm up on that roof to meet him. We say him. In Latvian, it's a he moon, not a she moon. So he is my boyfriend. So all these experiences in childhood remain with you as very vivid. And the wish to become a dancer was very, very early in my life. I think since I started walking, I danced. I cannot remember any time when I didn't dance. So this is my life. I have 2 books to my credit. One book came out earlier, 2001, and the other came out last year, straight after my Jubilee performance. And I have it still here on my lap. And here I have quite a lot of, this is it, and I have a lot of references to all my dancing years. For example, I have also brought to church services sacred dance as part of the service, not as a concert in church, which is different. So I was first in Australia to do that, where, by the way, I went as a refugee when my own country was occupied by Soviet Union, and we lost thousands and thousands of our people who were sent to Siberia, who were killed straight out, and in Siberia they were just worked and starved to death, and then thrown into mass graves after they had been taken there for weeks in cattle trains. So I remember also those times that my people went through. So they were really suffering a great deal. And I could not, therefore, return to my country while this was going on. So after I studied in Vienna, the Russian army came also into Vienna. And we were bombed, of course, and the war was its ugly face, showed up, and straight into my face. So I then, as a refugee, ran away from Vienna also, not to be caught by the Russian army. My best friend suffered tremendously. She stayed behind, and she was raped by Russian soldiers, and she was a virgin. So she really wanted to take her life after that. So all this I somehow got away from, but the suffering was real. And when you lose your own country and you cannot return to it, it is a very special experience that you are not belonging anywhere anymore if you can't return to the country of your birth. That was a very difficult time. When war finished, we were all the people who were non-Germans from different countries, refugees and couldn't return to their countries. We were then put into this DP camps, as they call them, refugee camps. For about 3 to 4 years, I was shifted from one camp to another. But even then, I found a choreographer from the Opera of Prague, Czechoslovakia, who organized the refugee dancers. Amongst the refugees were professional dancers like me, and I had already danced in theaters and films in Vienna. So we were organized into a dance company, and then started all the emigration in various countries, because we had to finally leave those displaced person camps. And there was a very strange experience. The Argentinian Commission came to our camp and saw our performance of our dance company. We went from one camp to another to give performances, but also performed for the American Army. And we were paid with cigarettes. That was the valuta of that day. German money didn't count at that time. So then the Argentinians saw us and invited us to migrate to Argentina. I already quickly started learning Spanish, preparing myself. But then we learned that when you deal with Latin Americans, it's always mañana. And so it was mañana, mañana after mañana, and nothing was arranged. Then I forgot about Argentina. So then I thought, well, the best way maybe for me as a dancer might be going to America. But at that time, America didn't take refugees who didn't have relatives in America or didn't have people who vouched for them. So I didn't know anybody here in America. So that was out. But then I thought maybe Canada, which is next door to America, I can always switch over quickly. But then I saw how the commission looked at the prospective migrants. They even touched the muscles of the young men to see whether they were strong enough to work as cheap laborers in their forests. And I didn't like that approach, so I tore up the form that I had started filling out. Then, as it goes in life, you always meet somebody who turns your life around. So I met a very nice lady from Australia. She worked for UNICEF, for the children at UNRWA, United Nations organization. And we were, all our displaced person camps were under United Nations. And I met her, and she was just asking me, what would I do with migration, where would I like to go? And she suggested that I might do very well in Australia. Well, of course, Australia didn't enter my mind at all, because for a European, Australia is somewhere beyond imagination, almost. And so I took her advice, and I started the action of becoming a migrant to Australia. So with my sister, we went to Australia from Augsburg, from that migration displaced person camp, where people went onto the ship for 40 days on a ship to Australia from Augsburg. Well, on the way, we even had a concert. There were some other artists, and I was also asked to take part in that concert. The ship captain was a Norwegian, very nice fellow with his wife, who was also on the ship, and a Norwegian doctor. And he wanted a concert by the artists who were on that ship, migrant ship. But I had no costume. I had nothing. I didn't have any belongings to speak of. But then he gave me sheets of the ship, and he told me, make a costume. And I did. And with that costume, I performed in that ship concert, and later in Australia, that very photo in that costume, in a dance position, went on the cover of a magazine, the Pix magazine. I have it even in my book. So then finally we arrived in Australia, and there, of course, it was very difficult the first 2 years. We had to sign for 2 years to work in a hospital. Well, that for a dancer, this is quite a change. And it was probably one of the most difficult times, apart from the war itself, that I went through, because I was really kind of cut off my profession, my love of my life. Although, of course, in between, whenever I could, I was going for training in dance studios, and also gave performances in between whenever I could fit it in, but it wasn't quite the same, because mainly I was a nurse. And I missed out on 2 very important tours with a modern dance company, which would have been a tour that I could have taken with them, but wasn't allowed because of the contract. That would have been South Africa, which I never went to, just North Africa. And also another tour to India, which I could have taken much earlier than I did myself later on. I went 3 times to India. First time I was received by Prime Minister Nehru, second time by Indira Gandhi, and the third time by also her son Rajiv Gandhi. So I know the whole Gandhi dynasty. So it was very difficult in Australia to begin with. But then when I had finished my 2-year contract there as a migrant, I opened my dance studio, I did my performances, I formed my own dance group, and I also had my own half-hour shows on television on the ABC in Australia, which were shown all over Australia. Now, here is the photograph in my book of the costume I did with the bed sheets of the migrant ship going to Australia, which this very photograph was on the cover of a magazine in Australia. It's a dancing nurse, they then said, because at that time I was a nurse in a hospital. And the other photograph too in the same costume from the bed sheets. I kept it. Then also, now here, that also may be interesting. Here, I was a principal dancer in Kismet, the Broadway show, which went on for 1.5 years in Melbourne, and then Sydney, and back in Melbourne again. I was principal dancer and did the part of the Indian princess Samaris. When I came to New York, I saw the show here in Lincoln Center and met my counter princess. Well, this book that came out has a lot of photographs that deal with my work. Here, maybe that's interesting. Here I do an ancient Latvian dance of an ancient priestess. That too. I'm attracted by old, ancient things, since I'm ancient myself. So here I am in a temple, which I will tell you about, in Greece, my favorite temple that I visit every year since 70. This was taken in London, by the way. So I found when I was in Greece, invited to teach on faculty of various art centers, I was shown this wonderful temple of Vija on the island of Egina. And when I saw it, it was a very sudden recognition of a place that I knew and I had been before in one of my previous lives. I knew that. People always ask, how do you know that? And then I answer, either you know it or you don't. And I knew it. It was really like a flashback, and I knew this is where I have been working as a dance priestess, a temple dancer, and I am returning to that temple every year to gain more strength to survive yet another winter in New York. So it's the temple of Vija on the island of Egina. It's the best preserved Doric temple, by the way, and it is one of the three on the triangle, like the Parthenon in Athens, then in Sunion, the Poseidon temple, and this temple of Vija on the island of Egina. These are on exact equal side triangles, and that triangle is a symbol of the divine. It's interesting how they worked it out then. It's exactly like that. So whenever I go back, I always feel that I'm kind of recharging myself in a spiritual sense, because I'm belonging to something like that. This year I'm going again. So I will again renew myself, recharge myself. And I think it's very important for everyone to find where they come from, what they did before, because this is not the only life that we have or had. We have been through many lives. I firmly believe that, because our soul goes through school. We are coming here to go to school, to learn, to become better from one life to another, until we don't need to return. So I think this, in that temple, I also saw another temple in India, which did the same to me as well. So I'm connected to temple and temple dance, and therefore sacred dance, which I have introduced in various church services, in 3 continents in fact. I was the first one in Australia. I was the first one in England, nobody did it. I danced in St. Martin's in the Fields, Southwark Cathedral, Coventry Cathedral. And I was the first one also in many churches here in the USA, coast to coast, on my coast to coast dance concert tour. That is how I came to America, in fact. This year, 14, is exactly marking 50 years since I came to the United States. And I was invited. I didn't come here to hope for a better life or to hope for some material gains, as so many people do. No. I was invited for a coast-to-coast dance concert tour. And so, also of Canada, coast-to-coast, I danced in 36 cities after having come here on a ship again. I love ships and seas. And this time 30 days on ship from Sydney. And I danced in 36 cities, 2-hour-long dance performances. And it's exactly 50 years ago that I came here doing that. The same in Canada. And then I didn't come to stay, but as it happens in life, you plan one thing, but something else happens. And I was all ready after the tour to return to my studio in Melbourne, Australia. and to my dance group, and to my half-hour shows on television, on the BBC, and so forth. But it so happened that after having studied, after my tour, I wanted to know what modern dance is like in America. So I studied, there was Martha Graham, Jose Limon, and Jose Limon took me into his group during the dance festival at the Connecticut College, where I got a foreign scholarship to study with them and also dance in Jose Limon's dance group in his premiere of Choreographic Offering, which is still in their program. And then I thought after that, I am off back to Australia. But it didn't happen. I was asked to be on faculty of theatre school and also to teach at Carnegie Hall in another dance studio. So my students actually are responsible that I'm still here. So they asked me, they said, why don't you open your own studio? We will all come to you. They apparently liked how I taught. So after a long time of force and back, thinking force and back, I thought, well, I outstayed my time anyway. I had not planned to even stay that year because at the beginning when I was offered the faculty job in that theatre school, I immediately said only one academic year, no longer, and I returned to my studio in Australia. So I always stayed my time anyway, and then I thought the students may be right. So I looked for a space, found my studio space, opened my studio, and they indeed all came to me. So I started a studio in New York City, somewhere in 6th Avenue, opposite Gimbel's, which doesn't exist anymore. And now I have a studio and kept on teaching in my studio at Westpac, the Artist Center. So here I am still, but every year I do go overseas to do my work in my country, since we are now free since '90. But before that I went to London every year giving performances on stage and television and teaching, also doing some teaching. And that was London first, while my country was still occupied by Soviet Union. But when my country was freed and regained independence in 1991, since then I'm going every year visiting my country, give performances there, teach at the university, master classes, I'm on television, on the radio, and being interviewed, and they call me the legendary Vija in Latvia. So this has been more or less my life. I have left out a lot. I think you can't tell everything at once, so maybe that should suffice. And unless we have more things, well, I've left out a lot, of course, but when you live for 91 and a half, very important, years, then of course you experience a lot of things that may be interesting for other people to know and learn from. One learns from it oneself, of course. All the experience that one had, from negative to positive, is all that big school of life which I went through. Now, in my Jubilee performance, I danced a dance that was to the spoken word of the American Indian poem. And I like it very much, because this is something that I think we all should think about. It says, and I interpreted it in dance while it was said, recited by an actress in Latvia, this year and last year also. And it says, "Don't stand at my grave and cry. because I'm not there. I am the wind that touches your cheek. I am the rain that cools your forehead. I am the rainbow, and I'm the colors in the rainbow that give you joy, and so forth. It says about one being part of nature. One is not vanishing just like that. One is not just dying off. One keeps on going, and our life keeps on going. So we are not in that grave. This, what I would like to be said at my burial. Do not stand at my grave and cry, because I am not there.